Imagine having a school year so successful that you definitely minimize the Sunday scaries and maybe even look forward to Monday mornings. And I'm not talking about some distant dream like winning the lottery or making 200 grand as a teacher and being paid what you're worth. Now, what I'm sharing with you today is a systematic approach, a roadmap for achieving the school year that you desire in terms of having a smooth connection with parents. When you don't effectively handle these situations, the stakes are high. It can not only affect your job or job satisfaction, but also the student's success, which, let's be honest, can have negative repercussions in the long run. So today, I'm giving you 7 strategies, a teacher's toolkit, if you will, that will not only make your interactions with parents smoother, but will also transform your school year. Now, one thing that will absolutely transform your school year is hitting that like and subscribe button so that you won't miss out on all the ways that can help you feel empowered this year. So the first strategy for dealing with difficult parents is to try to understand where they're coming from. Now, this can be a lot easier if you are a parent, but if you're not a parent, then maybe try to think of it as maybe being a pet parent, or maybe you have a niece or a nephew or a younger cousin or sibling. Just basically you being in a situation where you really care about another child or someone that's dependent on you. Because honestly, parents are doing the best that they can. A lot of us, or actually most of us, we just parent the way that we were parented. And so we're basically going off of what we've seen our parents do. Now, some parents and people in general are aware enough to not pass on any trauma that they had when they were kids, but a lot of times people don't even really realize how their parents created this trauma in their lives, and so they just end up parenting the same way and their kids kind of get the same trauma. So sometimes we have conflicts with parents because we have expectations of them that really don't align with their reality, and vice versa. And so that's something that we have to take into account, especially when we're thinking about how we communicate with parents. For example, you might expect a parent to be there to read all of your emails and read all the handouts that you give and to help their child with homework, but that parent could be working 2 jobs and the student rarely ever sees their parent. And we can't judge that parent because at least they're providing food and a roof over their head, and no, they may not be able to be there to be as involved in their child's education, but again, they're doing the best that they can. I've heard of teachers really criticizing parents for not being there to help their child or just being around at all, but really we can't judge them because again, they're doing the best that they can. Also, some parents parent out of fear, and so they are worried about things happening to their child that happen to them, and so they're coming from a fearful place, and the interactions that they have with you could also be stemming from that. So that's not to say that it's an excuse for when parents are belligerent or when parents are unreasonable in their demands, but trying to look at the situation from a more objective point of view will really help you in terms of being able to communicate effectively with them. So that brings me to my next tip, which is having open communication. And so this involves letting parents know what is going on in your class. It doesn't mean bombarding them on a daily basis with emails or newsletters about what the students did that day, but finding a balance where you do communicate with parents what it is that is happening so that they know how to best support their student. For example, you could consider sending out a weekly newsletter via email or in person so that parents know what to expect in terms of maybe any upcoming tests or quizzes or projects or major assignments. And then if they have the time, they can help their student if needed. As I mentioned in my last video about open house, you can also let parents know ahead of time what the homework schedule is. So if you are assigning homework every night, or if you have a major quiz on Friday that you give a study guide for maybe like on a Wednesday, let the parents know that so that they can help their student, or at least remind them to study for that quiz or remind them to do homework. And then you definitely want to take extra steps for students that are struggling to get their work done or are struggling even behaviorally. So this is when you're going to communicate with specific parents, even if they're not responding, even if they're not picking up the phone, you just need to try and see if you can get a hold of them and see if you can get the student some support at home. You definitely want to cover your bases and at least make the effort. Anytime I have a lot of students that are confused about an assignment, or if I have parents that are asking the same question, I I will send out an email to all of my students and their parents so that I can clear up any confusion. And if there's something major coming up that I definitely think that the parents need to help their students study for, or more like help remind them to study for it or be prepared for, then I will send out communication. I don't send weekly newsletters because the students that I have are pretty much on top of keeping up with their assignments and work. But if you do have a population that struggles a lot, or if you have a certain subset of students that are frequently behind, then you can send something weekly to those parents so that they can help you out. And that way the kids are getting support both at home and at school. So strategy number 3 is active listening and empathy. So when we're communicating with parents, let's say that you have a concern about their student because their student is behind, hasn't done any work, is misbehaving, we want to be in a place where we are empathetic and where we are trying to come from the parent's point of view. And here's why. Even if a student is legitimately being disruptive, it's just like not a good person in general, we want to be really mindful of our tone. We want to think about the way that we are communicating or talking about that student, their progress, and their behavior in a way that doesn't put the parent on the defensive. Because no matter what, a parent doesn't want to think the worst things about their kids, because in the end, it also makes them feel like a really bad parent. So if you're telling them that their kid constantly misbehaves, is rude, or if you just do any kind of name calling, that's going to put the parent on the defensive, and they are probably going to then attack, and things could get really ugly. So you want to think about, if you were receiving that message, that email, phone call, letter, how would you receive it? So maybe if you receive something similar about your style of teaching, how would you feel about that? Or if maybe someone had said, oh wow, your dog is like really misbehaved and ugly, how would you feel about that? So really think about your tone and your delivery when it comes to communicating with parents. I have personally read so many emails that other teachers ran by me and said, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, no, 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 do not send. And I would help them edit it with the idea of, how would you want to receive that message? Like, how could someone communicate the same message to you in a way that makes you want to improve, that makes you want to actually work with the other person? So maybe try running that email by a colleague, or if you trust your administrators, and having them read it. Or if you don't have anyone like that, you can definitely use AI. There have been a few times that I've used ChatGPT and said, please rewrite this email in a way that is positive and that will get a positive response, or at least a helpful response from the other person. And so you can just basically write down the gist of what you're trying to say. You can just put it unedited with all the thoughts that you're thinking, no matter how negative they are, and ask ChatGPT to just fix it for you so that the receiver won't get mad. Because think about it, what do you really want? What is the result that you want from that email? Do you want the parent to get mad? Do you want the parent to go and beat their child for being disrespectful? Like, what do you want from the parent? And use that to frame how you deliver your message. And if you use that, and I've been using that frame for many, many years, and only a couple times I've probably slipped and had kind of a not so great tone with expected results. But if you are framing your message that way to get a more positive, constructive, helpful response from the parent, then you need to really think about how you write those emails and messages. So the next tip, in addition to active listening and being empathetic in your communications, is to set expectations. So hopefully at this point, you let parents know your policy, particularly with grading and homework that's late, homework that is missing, maybe retakes and things like that. So it's a good time to reiterate the policy for a particular situation. But something that really goes a long way is flexibility. So if you tell a parent, I only allow students to retake a test if they have a C or below on it, but because I saw that Jonathan really struggled with this particular unit and I didn't have time to give him extra practice, I will let him retake it if he has shown me that he studied for it. So some flexibility in there will really go a long way in terms of maintaining a good parent-teacher relationship there, because it really helps if the parent is on your side and working with you rather than blaming you for their child's failures. And if you're going to make any kind of accommodations for the student, let the parent know what your expectations are. So yes, I'm going to let them turn their work in late, but they have 2 days. Or I'm going to let them turn in their work, a week late, but it has to be completed or it has to be X, Y, and Z. So the flexibility is there, which means that you're compromising, but you still have your expectations so that the parent knows that they're not just going to get away with whatever. Now, the next strategy, which can be a little bit hard in terms of communicating with parents, is to stay positive and professional. Now, look, I have received my share of nasty emails from parents because they're just reacting and they just really don't care about how they're coming off via email. And so trying to respond in a way that isn't equally snarky can be really difficult. I mean, let's be honest, if we're being attacked, the natural response is to defend ourselves. But that's not something that we want to do in terms of being defensive or being nasty right back at them, because I'll just tell you, it's going to escalate. It's going to get worse, and it's probably going to move higher up the chain, which is going to be a headache over what? A late assignment. Over what? A student talking across the room. Do you really want that headache just so that you can get back at them? I mean, yeah, it would feel good to get back at them. But you could just write that nasty email and delete it. I've done that many, many times. Or I've written it and shown it to a coworker who knows about the situation and be like, I really want to say this, but I'm not. And you can commiserate with them about it. And then you write the email that really you should have written. So let's also make sure that when we are communicating with the parent that we're not attacking the student as a person. We are more discussing the behaviors that the student is doing so that we're not saying that the student is a bad student, that the student is lazy, is rude, disrespectful. We don't want to say the student is this, but we do want to say the student behaves this way, the student is being this way. I know it just seems like I'm splitting hairs or that it's semantics, but it goes a long way in terms of not making a parent want to fight back or not making a parent want to go straight to your principal because of the email or message that you sent. So we want to make it professional in a way that, again, empathy in the way that we would want to receive it. If we got an email with some criticism from our administrator, how would we want that to be worded? How could the administrator word it in a way that would make us more receptive? So again, professional and empathetic. These two things will go a long way in terms of maintaining parent-teacher relationships with all of the parents that your students have. Now, let's say that you have a parent-teacher meeting. They want to meet with you and talk to you in person. It can also get kind of hard there to either not cower and be insecure or on the opposite end to not fight back and get belligerent as well. But you really aren't going to win if it turns into a yelling match. So if a parent starts to get too much in your face and starts attacking you, you need to end the meeting just right then and there. You do not have the right to talk to you that way. They are not your boss. If you think that a parent is going to be coming at you in an angry way, then I suggest that you either have an administrator there or maybe that student's counselor, or even better, if you have one, I would have a union rep there with you. That way there's someone who is not only a witness, but someone who will hopefully back you up. Unless you don't have a principal that backs you up, then use one of the other options. But do not ever let a parent verbally attack you. Do not ever let a meeting go to a place like that. Just end it and leave. Ask them to leave. Just try to keep your cool. Trust me. Now, I alluded to this in the last tip, but for the next strategy is to involve your administration when necessary. Now, I definitely don't think that you should ever just escalate things to your principal right away. If a student is misbehaving, unless they have a weapon at school, but anything below that, even if they're bullying or if they're doing something that really is inappropriate in class, you want to deal with it first. You want to deal with the student first. You want to maintain that relationship with the student. You're going to be with them the whole year. And then you want to talk to the parent and see if you can work with them. And if that doesn't work after you've taken those steps, then it's good to involve the counselor or the administration. They need to be there to back you up. I know that for some of you, you don't have administrators that will back you up. However, you do want to at least let them know of the situation, because at least you can say that you told them. Even if they do nothing about it, you want to put it in writing via a message or something like that and let them know. That way, if it does escalate, you can say, I told you about this. I definitely gave you information about it. And so here we are. Now what? because your administrator should definitely back you up as a teacher. And if they don't, you have to see if there's someone else above them that you can get to support you in the situation. My last strategy, which is so important, I cannot stress enough, is to document everything. So this will start from the beginning, especially if you start to notice a pattern with a student. You want to keep a log of strategies that you've used to work with them, whether it's a behavior thing or if it's an academic thing. You want to keep a log, because if you've been using certain strategies to try to get them to behave in class, or if you're doing extra scaffolding or extra measures to get them to be successful, you want to make sure that you have a log. That way, if someone comes back to you and says that you didn't do anything, you have proof. You also want to keep a log of conversations that you've had with the student, with the parents, counselors, and administrators. Definitely keep a log. And again, if someone tries to hold you accountable for an incident that happens in class, or for a student not passing your class, or not being successful, or not having gains that the parent and the school had expected, you can show them that you have had these conversations, you've done X, Y, and Z for this student, and it still hasn't worked, and you haven't gotten any support. So you want to always have that log, because that can really save your butt. Now, I know that some of these tips can skew a little bit on the negative, and a lot of the time, if you have a student that's doing what they're supposed to do, you're not going to have to worry about them. If you have supportive parents who are making sure that their student does what they're supposed to do, or who's already on top of it when their student is struggling, you don't have to worry about it. You mainly have to worry about the parents who are going to blame you for everything that's happening, or who is going to attack you for things that you're doing in your class in terms of how you teach or what you teach, or parents who want to nitpick about every single thing and want extra help or extra special attention for their student. Those are the parents that you have to work with and worry about, and they're the ones who are going to probably cause the most anxiety for you, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you are proactive in terms of the way that you communicate with them, how often you communicate with them, and just keeping in mind that they are doing the best that they can, you can avoid so many problems. Not all. There are still some parents out there that are extra. Let's just put it that way. But you can really minimize those negative interactions if you follow these 7 strategies. So maybe this year you're teaching at a new school and you feel completely lost. You don't know where anything is or who to ask for certain things, or you're just really confused about how the school works. Then be sure to click on this video next, where I give you 6 tips and 6 questions that you should ask so that you can feel at ease and really feel like you know what's going on.